I'm joined now by three MPs from the different parties. Stephen McKinnon is a Liberal MP for Gatineau, and he's the Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Public Services and Procurement. Michael Cooper is the Conservative MP for the riding of St. Albert Edmonton, and Rachel Blaney is the NDP member for North Island Powell River in British Columbia. All three of you, thank you very much for taking the time.
Hello, Martin.
Can we start with something which was a fairly major issue in question period on Friday as the week ended, and that is the Infrastructure Bank. Stephen McKinnon, Globe and Mail has an article detailing all sorts of very, very high-level negotiations and discussions for months between a major private asset manager, the largest asset managing company in the world, BlackRock, and the federal government to get this bank up and running, but the opposition is concerned about potential conflicts of interest. What should Canadians be thinking of this kind of cooperation between private enterprise and this bank, which is yet to be set up?
Well, what they should first be thinking is that this government is honoring its commitment to renew Canada's infrastructure. It should be thinking that we've made massive investments, massive commitments to cost-sharing agreements with provinces, municipalities, in some cases Indigenous peoples. It should take from this that we want to attract private capital, in some cases foreign capital. All of those things are good things in order to renew Canada's infrastructure. The government, in its fall economic update, committed money to launch this infrastructure bank. We have come forward with strong governance proposals. We've come forward with a number of criterion that must be met, and now we are obviously in the stage where private investors are coming forward and hopefully will complement federal investments such that major pieces of infrastructure, and really we're not talking about local water and sewer projects, we're not talking about small projects, we're talking about large, strategic, transformative, in many cases economic capacity building projects that will be considered by this infrastructure bank. I think it's very exciting.
Okay, Michael Cooper, I know your party as well as the NDP were raising this issue in question period. What are the concerns? What concerns do you see?
Well, there are all kinds of concerns with this project, with the infrastructure bank, in terms of questions around conflicts of interest. It seems that this government is intent on privatizing profit and nationalizing risk, leaving taxpayers on the hook in the way of guarantees. The government has yet to define exactly what the structure of the infrastructure bank is going to be. They've shed no light. They have not been clear whether investors could pick and choose which infrastructure projects to invest in. Steve McKinnon says this isn't about roads, water, sewer, and community infrastructure projects, but it is, because this government took $15 billion that was allocated towards community infrastructure and put it in the infrastructure bank, taking away the ability of communities to build roads, to build sewers, and upgrade community infrastructures. And that's on top of this government's failed infrastructure plan. This government gets an A when it comes to announcing infrastructure, but when it comes to actually delivering infrastructure in terms of shovels in the ground, they get a big fat F, because of all the announcements and ribbon cuttings that the government has participated in over the last 18 months. Only 2% of infrastructure projects actually have shovels in the ground. It goes to show that the plan is in shambles, and that this government's infrastructure plan is no plan at all.
Okay, Rachel Blaney, if I'm not mistaken, I think you were up in the House on this today. What's your concern? What's the NDP's concern about the infrastructure bank and the revelations of the article that we saw today?
Well, I think across Canada, Canadians in general are concerned. And I think we have to go back to the reality. We've been asking about this for a long time. And this was really something hidden. It was something up front with Canadians that this was their plan. It was sort of something that evolved slowly with a lot of secrecy. And today we saw it revealed. We know now that BlackRock has been talked to about how they would talk about the infrastructure bank, speeches that they were planning to do. They're vetting it through an industry. So, let's look at the reality. We are giving money into a bank where we're going to be having private folks putting money into it, and then we don't know what that means. We don't know what that means for infrastructure across our country. We don't know what it means for tolls and fees. We know that the industries are all going to want a substantial profit. That's their job. But where are the taxpayers in all of this? And we're talking about a government that said that they would be transparent, that they would talk to the Canadian people, that they would include them. But either way that you look, Canadians are going to be on the hook. And I think this is an important part as well. This is another piece of important legislation that's been put through an omnibus budget bill. And I would really encourage this government, and we have done so many times, take this out, let's have a meaningful discussion about it, and let's see more accountability, because Canadians deserve to know where their public money is going. And we're talking about $15 billion. Maybe that doesn't seem like a lot to this government, but it's a lot to everyday Canadians who are going to be footing the bill either way.
Okay, Stephen McKinnon, I guess the question that has come up in addition is that, as you said, this is a $35 billion infrastructure bank that's going to take proposals from private industry, but you have the largest representative of private industry helping design the bank, and then you also have members of the Prime Minister's, you have the members of the Prime Minister's economic advisory body, like Mr. Sabia of the Caisse de dépôt et déplacement, also advising the government, and the concern is, are they already setting the structure and the rules for they themselves who are going to then bid on projects?
Well, let's just first remember that any time you have both the Conservatives and the New Democrats opposing a project and a nation-building project like this, it usually means that we've gotten it right. Look, the fact is, the fact is that.
Okay, but to the concern that I raised, I mean, could it also be that they agree on the concern? What about the concern?
The fact is that people like Mr. Sabia represent large public pension funds. Their job is to derive, indeed, increases in that pension capital for the benefit of pensioners, in the case of Mr. Sabia in Quebec, but you have teachers and OMERs and in Alberta, AIM, and in BC, BC IMB. The fact is that we have the pools of capital here in Canada, many of whom are chasing returns in public infrastructure in Australia, in the Middle East, in the United Kingdom. Canadians own, through their pension funds, parts of Heathrow Airport, parts of toll highways in Australia. The kind of model that we're seeing that has developed these major pieces of strategic infrastructure around the world, the infrastructure bank will afford these kinds of opportunities to Canadian-sourced pension funds. Indeed, foreign funds, like we are able to invest in other countries, they will be able to invest in Canada. This is an unalloyed good thing. This means that taxpayers are not putting up the risk capital. Taxpayers aren't on the hook for the risk, and that private individuals put up the risk capital, assume a portion of the risk of these projects, and Canadians get to derive the benefits from these pieces of infrastructure.
I want to jump in now because I think we have to deal with the other big issue that dominated this week, and that is the Defence Minister, HARJIT SAJJAN. Calls from the opposition all week long for Defence Minister HARJIT SAJJAN to step down because of his exaggeration of his role in Operation Medusa, one of the biggest battles in the Afghanistan war. The minister has apologized, but Stephen McKinnon, he's your colleague. The opposition still says he should step down. Do you think HARJIT SAJJAN, as a minister, do you think his effectiveness and his credibility has been fatally undermined by what he did?
Not at all. HARJIT SAJJAN is a soldier, a Canadian hero, someone who has served his country and his community with great distinction, and someone who enjoys the full confidence not only of the Prime Minister but of his caucus colleagues and indeed of the enlisted men and women of the Canadian Armed Forces. He'll be coming forward very soon with a defense policy review. He gave us some foreshadowing of that this week. It will be a comprehensive and costed plan. This minister is among the most productive and active defense ministers in recent memory, and we are looking very much forward to the proposals that he'll be bringing forward. I know know, as Parliamentary Secretary in Public Services and Procurement, how exciting it is to see the kinds of investments that are being contemplated and the open competitions that we are planning for materiel in Canada's military. And I know that these men and women will continue to be well served by HARJIT SAJJAN.
Okay, Michael Cooper, I'm going to flip the question on its head and ask it the other way, and that is, a lot of people have suggested he's apologized. This is not necessarily a firing offense. He exaggerated. He was guilty of an exaggeration. Why is it that the two opposition parties, you still insist that he must go?
Right. Well, first of all, just to Steve's point, the taxpayers are not going to be on the hook for the infrastructure bank is flat out false. Taxpayers are going to be on the hook to cover the losses of private investors on infrastructure projects. But to your question, Martin, on the minister, the fact is that the minister lied. He flat out lied about his role in Operation Medusa. He didn't do it once. He did it at least 2 times. He has apologized, but he apologized only after he got caught. He lied because he wanted to impress a foreign audience, and he thought he could get away with it, and he didn't. And what's more, we shouldn't minimize what the minister did here. We're talking about one of the largest operations in Canadian military history, an operation that involved the service and sacrifice of hundreds of Canadian soldiers. And the minister tried to take credit for their service and sacrifice. There's a term for that. It's called stolen valor. You know, the values, the fundamental values of the Canadian Armed Forces include service, sacrifice, integrity, and honor. What Minister SAJJAN did is the antithesis of those values. He has lost the moral authority to command the Canadian Armed Forces. He needs to do the right thing and resign.
Rachel Blaney, when you go back in your writing, and if someone, I anticipate maybe some people will say, well, no, you know, he's a decorated soldier who's fought valiantly for Canada, and now you're asking for his resignation. What do you say to them?
I think what's really important to know is that we're not questioning the hard work that he's done in his history in the military. You know, we recognize that and respect it. And I have the honor of serving a military base in my riding, and the work that they do every day is tremendously overwhelming, and I am so grateful for it. And I think it's very important that we honor the people who serve our country. Right now, with the Minister of Defense, there's just a lot of questions. We appreciate that he apologized, and that's absolutely correct. He told the story more than once publicly. It's something he needs to be held accountable for. But there's a lot of questions that are just not answered, and those questions need to be answered. And then you look at what's happening right now with the ending of the inquiry around the Afghan detainees. You know, again, we're put in this position where, you know, in his history, the minister said where he was a wealth of information, and now suddenly he knows absolutely nothing. I think the reality is when we see a minister that's having so many questions asked, there's so many things that people of Canada feel like they don't know, they don't understand. Is it one way or is it another? It really makes people ask questions, and we need to have this minister stand up and explain himself.
Okay, on that note, I want to wrap it up, but I want to also wrap it up, Steve MacKinnon, by wishing you good luck. I know a part of your riding is under flood watch or even underwater as we speak, so good luck helping your constituents in what's going to be a very tense weekend. Thanks, all three of you.
Most appreciated.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.